Hello, my name is Jack McAdams. I'm a sophomore finance major here at High Point, and today I'm going to be taking you through my presentation on the UK and its economy. I'm going to be analyzing it a little bit and letting you know what I think they should be doing to have a better economy. So, on the title slide here, I have a city in the UK, and on the right, I have a countryside in the UK. So, taking you through just the order of things, how they're going to go in this presentation. First off, I'm going to be giving you some background information on the history of the United Kingdom, how it came to be. And then I'm going to be giving you some fun facts. Then I'm going to be telling you about the current state of the economy. And this, I'm basically going to be showing you some figures that are regularly used to see how healthy an economy is. And then, based on those points, I'm going to tell you about what type of monetary policy I think they should be using. Even though I'm going to explain both, but tell you which one I think they should be using. And then I'm going to be talking about the international economic situation, so who they're mainly importing and exporting to, and then also their main imports and exports. Then I'm going to go into the exchange rate, specifically the exchange rate between the US dollar and the Great British Pound. Go through it the past couple of months, see how stable it's been. Then I'm going to be explaining the impossibility trilemma and what two policies I think or I know that the UK are using. So, first things first, some background. The UK ties its roots back to 1707. This is where the Kingdom of Scotland and the Kingdom of England, which included Wales, they united to form the Kingdom of Britain under the Treaty of Union. A little bit later on, they became the first industrialized country in the world, and this had a huge impact. They gained great economic power, and they held this power through most of the 19th century and early 20th centuries. Um, and then in the 1920s, British held power over a quarter, almost a quarter of the world's landmass, making them easily the biggest empire in the history of the world. And this all kind of changed a little bit after their involvement in the world wars. They took a big hit economically. Obviously, they've climbed back since then, but they took a huge hit economically, lost a bunch of their economic power. And then many people believe that the world wars after that kind of that's kind of what sparked the wave of decolonization and made them lose most of their colonies and kind of make them the country that we know them today, just a tiny country. So, a couple of fun facts. First and foremost, the UK has more than 40 different dialects. I really like this one. I think it's really interesting just because the UK is so small. And I actually have a friend that goes here who's from Manchester, and he says the dialects, they get even more specific than that. It's like you can drive a couple blocks down, and that area is going to have a different dialect than you do, which I think is super interesting. And then it also has the oldest underground railroad system in the world, which started in 1863. Stamps started in the United Kingdom. Also, Stonehenge, which is a historical site. Many people believe it to be built as a graveyard. It is actually older than the pyramids, which is interesting. And then, last but definitely not least, a Welsh town has the longest name in Europe. Uh, Clearly, it's very long. I tried to look up how to pronounce it. I couldn't get it. You can take a crack at it if you'd like. So now getting into the current state of the economy, the UK slipped into a technical recession in the last at the end of last year with the last two quarters, consecutive quarters, their economy shrunk. Which this is kind of the regular way that people see. Okay, if they've shrunk the last in two consecutive quarters, they're probably going through a bit of a recession. And actually, in the last quarter of last year, all three main sectors of the economy they shrunk, which is not good. But GDP for the UK generally is pretty big. It's ranked about sixth in the world, and it's sitting at a little over 300 or $30 trillion a year, and the per capita is sitting at about 46,000 per capita GDP. So now going into inflation, the inflation rate is currently sitting at 3.2%, which is pretty normal, but it is down from 0.2% in February. And back in 2022, the UK really struggled with inflation, it topping out at about 11.1% in October. That's not good. It's clear that they've been trying really hard to get that down, and it's clear that they've been pretty successful. Now going into unemployment, the unemployment rate is currently sitting at about 4.2%, which is pretty normal for a healthy country, but it is up from 0.2% at the very end of last year and 0.3% from last November. So it is growing a little bit. Now, going into the different types of monetary policy. So, basically, monetary policy is different ways that the central bank, which is independent from the government, can kind of spark life or kind of rein in the economy depending on what they need. So, the suggested form that I would say that the UK needs is expansionary. This is because they recently went through a recession and they kind of need some. They need to spark some growth in the economy. So, the main goal here is to increase aggregate demand. As you can see in the graph, you're increasing the aggregate demand to kind of get back in that long run equilibrium. So there's a couple ways that the central bank of the UK, which is the Bank of England, can do this. First off, they can buy government bonds to stimulate some growth. They can also decrease the reserve requirement ratio. So basically, what this does is it decreases the amount of money that a bank has to hold on to when they get deposits. And what this does is it frees up more money for them to invest into other things and spread out through the economy to increase the money supply and get some growth going. They can also decrease the interest rates. What this will do will increase the investment spending, which is also a great catalyst for growth in an economy. So the main goal here is to increase the supply of money in order to spark growth in the economy, which at this point I think the UK needs. They went through a recession, and also you can see in the later slide or in the earlier slide, their inflation has been going down, which marks need for maybe some more growth. So now going into contractionary monetary policy, I would not suggest this form of monetary policy. I would suggest this form of monetary policy for a country that's facing high inflation. So if you look back in 2022, when the UK was really doing bad with inflation, they probably used a lot of contractionary monetary policy to bring that in. And I think at this point, they've been successful at that, and they've maybe crossed that line a little bit, seeing as though that they went through a recession recently, and maybe it's time to kind of flip that back into expansionary. But contractionary, basically, the whole goal is to decrease aggregate demand, as you can see in the graph, to get back to long run equilibrium. And there's a couple ways they can do this. It's basically opposite from the expansionary strategies. One, sell government bonds, and then increase the reserve requirement ratio, which increases the amount that they need to hold on to, decreases the amount that they can spread into the rest of the economy. And then also increase interest rates, which will decrease investment spending. So the ultimate goal here is to decrease the money supply in order to make it more valuable and bring down inflation, which at this point I don't believe the UK needs to do. Now going into the exchange rate expectations with both expansionary and contractionary monetary policies. So first things first, with a suggested form of monetary policy, expansionary. So expansionary monetary policy would cause a depreciation in the value of the GBP, which in turn would increase the exchange rate. This is because the current exchange rate is sitting at about 0.8 GBP per US dollar to GBP is about 0.8. And in making the Great British pound a little bit less valuable, you kind of start to even that out, which that actually might help international trade between the US and the UK, because it's kind of bringing it close to that one exchange rate, which means the value of their currency is the same. So now going into contractionary monetary policy would cause an appreciation of the value of the GBP, which in turn would decrease the exchange rate. So now talking about their international economic situation, this is who they're mainly exporting to and importing from. So number one for exports is the United States at 20.9%, Germany at 6.8%, Netherlands at 6.8%, Ireland at 6.5%, France at 5.2%. Now imports, the United States number one again at 12.6%, Germany at 8.9%, China at 8.1%, Netherlands 7.2%, and France at 5.7%. So going into some of their main imports and exports, motor vehicles, mechanical power generators, medicinal and pharmaceutical products, mineral fuels such as crude oil, precious metals, back into imports, mineral fuels, mechanical appliances, electronic appliances, precious metals, and again, motor vehicles. So now I'm going to talk about the ease of doing business. First, specifically for the US to the UK, it's pretty easy to do business with them. Speaking as, we have a common language, you have minimal trade frictions, and we have a friendly business environment between the two of us. Also, talking about how easy it is to do business with the rest of the world, not just the U.S. They're known for being pretty easy to do business with, pretty business friendly, and they're consistently ranked 8th in the ease of doing business by the World Bank. So now I'm going to be going into the exchange rate, specifically from the USD to the GBP. So I tracked it over the last 6 months. In November of 2023, it was zero point 0.8, and then went down to 0.7 until March of this year, and then back up this month to 0.8. So the UK has a floating exchange rate. This has been the case since 1972, when they basically decided we're not going to set the value of our currency and set the exchange rates. And even though this is the case, the United States and the UK have had an extremely stable exchange rate, and this has been good for trade between the two of them. So now I'm going to be talking about the impossibility trilemma. So what the impossibility trilemma is it's the case that a country, when it comes to their international economics, they can't use all three of these policies at the same time. They can only use two at a time. So they can only use two sides of that triangle. So these policies are free capital flow, sovereign monetary policy, and fixed exchange rate. So the UK, they use free capital flow and they use independent monetary policy. They've been using independent monetary policy since 1998 with the Bank of England Act. And it's clear that they don't have a fixed exchange rate, and they don't peg their exchange rate for anybody. So that was my presentation on the economy of the UK. Here are my citations that I used. Thank you for listening.